If I had the power to change the order of service, I would have wanted one of the 6 pastors that are sitting here to come and do the preaching. I want to welcome all of you as preachers, as pastors in this denomination of ours. I want to single out Pastor Lewis, who served us so beautifully with the services of the late Sister Jennifer Abrahams. And we look forward to more of your services and sermons. I want to welcome all of the other pastors here. You know, you make me feeble or feel feeble. And I have spoken at huge gatherings in my life, high-level audiences. But when you have to speak to the children of God, it's not so easy. And but you also have the most powerful source behind you in the Spirit. So we look forward to a blessing that will be granted us by the Spirit. I want to also say that, you know, we have a service of remembrance when we have communion. Basically, we rekindle our thoughts about our salvation and how this was wrought, how this came about, and the importance of being connected and staying connected with our Lord and Savior, who has sacrificed, who has given us this wonderful opportunity to look forward and have the hope of a second coming. Without the sacrifice, we would be nothing. Remembering becomes an important part of the service. Remembering the cross, but also remembering ourselves and how we have moved and where we find ourselves today. Unless we look at the cross to see our shortcomings, but at the same time, our wonderful hope through the blood of Jesus Christ, we have failed. And this morning, we just want to stand still for a minute and remember where we've come from and how do we re-energize ourselves through the Spirit to keep on this journey. Memory is a difficult thing. Sister Letty and myself, and I would imagine even Pastor Lewis, that we forget. You smile as if you don't forget. Lisa, we all have that problem. You know, I was just thinking about what to speak on, a topic, and I said, it's so amazing to see how change has come about without us even thinking back. And the one thought that came to my mind was this monstrosity of a disease that caught all of us by surprise. Do you still remember that we had vaccinations? That we had to go in time when we had to travel abroad? That we had to separate? Andre, we have a son that is in medicine, and you know the type of prescription he gave us was amazing. When Yolanda and I thought of this and revisited those days, we couldn't fathom that, you know, we had to spray every piece of grocery that came into the house. You remember the times that we actually had to number the seats, how many of us could enter? Where's Elder Calvin Desai? He was the magistrate. He was the judge. He was the policeman that allowed only so many. And we had to just stand back. I remember a funeral that we couldn't hold here. We feel sorry still to this day about not having that member of this church being able to be buried out of his church, his congregation. I remember cases that I personally felt to this day was a very cruel type of passing. I remember Leon Cranfield, where he reached out to someone that was in need, stretching out no, I will take you. Another brother jumped into the car with a sick patient, rushing them to hospital, just to find out that the next day, both of them died. Can you imagine that? Why don't we remember those things? Because there's something that steps in. I had a beautiful way of expressing that. But it is that memory that just fades with time. And it's amazing how things have changed. But this whole world is a changing scene. At every point in life, ask me about change. I now have to run every morning for a half an hour just to manage the change in my life, just to keep this thing sane. Go to the gym, yes, Elder Brits, so that we keep on facing the realities of the day. Change is a wonderful thing in one moment, but a very, very tough to manage thing on the other. You look at the world and you see the changes that occur there. Man, oh man, I don't want to think about this little thing. You know, it drives me crazy because I can't keep a pace with what happens in this machine and how we must adjust all the time. All the time. So the world out there changes and we must adapt. You have new presidents coming in, and you have new executive orders being issued. And that changes our view of the future. So it's amazing to think of the changes we have undergone over the last 5 years or so. Death was common to us during that time. The most devastating crisis, I say, was undoubtedly the COVID pandemic that shook the world, touched our lives, so many of us. What a shock. Yet, we who trust and believe, we've managed to have this experience actually drift away, becoming fainter in memory, almost to oblivion, except for those who suffered and was touched by this disease. This is absolutely amazing that we can overcome even those things. Do you remember the importance of masks? I still have packs of masks. I don't know what to do with them. They say don't throw them away. But the World Health Organization has actually stipulated that this pandemic is something of the past. They call it out as something that we can forget about. The nurses sit here, they will condemn me if I speak nonsense. But that is it. This is absolutely crazy. You remember the N95 mask? It's the one that was the safest, right? And then the PCR tests, the vaccines. This was the past. But what I'm speaking about is resilience out of situations like that. We have adapted, right? We're flexible. And that is a God-given blessing. How flexible are we? How pliable, how resilient are we in circumstances? This church and this congregation has shown resilience in standing up and moving on. So we arrive on a new day, a new month in April. Can we imagine that? 3 months are gone. We're into the, I wouldn't say the home stretch, but we're on our way to say goodbye to 2025, right? It's new environment, moving forward to a bright and beautiful new beginning. So it's time again when we gather to remember the ultimate sacrifice which was sealed for our eternal inheritance. Do we acknowledge this often enough? This provision, I say, is a gift that keeps on giving. Christ keeps on giving. Our blessings on a daily basis are unimaginable. It is new every morning. So how do I get to the text that I chose today? I said something about wineskins. This is a metaphor that Jesus actually utilized with his disciples. Now, we who live, Pastor Brits, in the modern era, don't really understand what a wine sack is, or as they called it, a pouch, a wine skin, and that was goat skin that was sewn together. No one, the text says, pours new wine into old wine skins. Otherwise, the wine will burst its skins, and both the wine and the wine skins will be ruined. The culture or practice of carrying small quantities of wine, not in bottles. We use bottles these days, right? And yes, cartons as well. Where's the papsak? There was, you don't remember the papsak, but there was a time that the papsak reigned supreme, especially in our community, don't say it. But they had this goat hide sewn in together at the edges to form a watertight bag. So as the fermentation process continued, it would then produce gas that expanded the wineskin and slowly stretched it, right? Stretched it. So as the wine was consumed, it would gradually stretch to the pouch, or stretch the pouch to its maximum size. Using the same skin again would therefore result in the pouch breaking as the new wine would start its own fermentation, naturally bursting the pouch. We can imagine that. There's no expansion in the skin of a used goat skin pouch. Elasticity, in other words, is needed, which the used skin does not possess any longer. And that's the mechanics behind the wine pouch. Biblical scholars often speak of the need to provide the necessary expansion possibilities within a structure. And this is the essence of the message, short message, is where is our capabilities of expanding? And this could be in the new structure that we envisage, that would be big enough, larger than the need, or just an extension of the existing structure. To not be too rigid in holding to patterns and processes of the past, but to be flexible. And this transits now to how we as individuals transit from the one stage to the next stage. And that's an important part. As you grow older, or in stages of whatever, you would have to have that adaptability, that stretch-like pattern that we have, or capability that we have. Processes of the past are there, but we must be able to move freely forward. I think in churches, and the theologians will tell us, there are the principles, but within the changing world and cultures that we find ourselves in, sometimes the goat skin pouch must also give way a little bit, and newness must enter in. In realizing this need, we must therefore be careful and acknowledge the challenges that this text brings to us, not only in the structure of the church, but also with regard to individuals. This is an example. Do we come here every quarter and go through the rituals? We do it, but there's no change. And this is what this message would like to bring to you as we remember this very important part of our belief system. Do we find a change in our abilities to serve God differently and better? That is what we are called to do. How about submitting ourselves to be new vessels for God's mission and work? That we would be positioned, ready to sustain future growth and future change. Because change is part and parcel of our lives. How do we assimilate? How do we make provision for our young people, for instance? These are important aspects. Are we elastic enough to allow His Spirit to stretch and shape and mold us after His will? I think that's the essence of what I'm trying to say. But let's look, I think I still have a few minutes. Let's look at another example of adjusting with times and needs. And I go to emphasize the need to adapt in 1 Samuel 17, verses 38 and 39. Saul dressed David, and we know the story about Saul, about David and Goliath. We had it a few weeks ago in a sermon. But we find him here, Saul dressing David in his own tunic. He put a coat of armor on him and a bronze helmet on his head. And David started fastening on his sword over the tunic and tried walking around with it. Impossible, he said, because he was not used to them. I cannot go in these, he says, because I'm not used to them. So he took them off. That's David. The picture being painted here is someone that was totally out of his league. This bulky frame, this bulky helmet is alien to David. Not to speak of the breastplate. So cumbersome. Sometimes we have practices that are so cumbersome, and we don't relieve ourselves from those. There is nothing as uncomfortable as that new pair of shoes. It does not fit you comfortably, but you must be in style, you must be in fashion, okay? So that heel, I sometimes wonder how they walk, these men. These heels that are so high and thin, but they walk. I remember our childhood days when Christmas and camp meetings would come. We would get our only pair of shoes for the year. And because there is only one pair left when my dad goes to Usman or to Vicky Hayes, to buy the shoes just before Christmas or just before the camp meeting, we had to take them, irrespective of whether they were too small or too big. You just had to take. The suit's the same. I mean, I had a suit, and I spoke about this long ago many a times. I had to go down to pick up the bottom of the suit just to get my hands into the pocket, because that was also style. But this you would take, and by lunchtime at that camp meeting, Pastor Lewis, you will remember, on the grounds of the camp meeting, Chris Adams, Owen Koopman, Tony and myself, my brother and myself, were all bare feet, and we've got those shoes around the neck. They did not fit. They were just totally out of size. Now, in the case of the biblical account of this mighty battle, it was a case of life or death for an entire people, right? The Israelites. So it was of utmost importance that David had to feel comfortable in his fighting gear. So we must be. Whatever is demanded or from us to do in the church, we must feel comfortable with that, right? Physically and metaphorically, Saul suggested armor that was the old, while David was a picture of the new, fast-moving, small, can take a gap, right? The agile, the flexible, and the natural. David was the new kind of warrior preparing for a different kind of battle. We have a battle, right? Are we adjusting? Are we flexible sufficiently? We all know the end when David took out the giant Goliath with a well-executed swing of his sling, shot in between the eyes of the giant, the only unprotected part of his body. The rest, we know, is history. Is God not looking for a new thing? I sometimes wonder. A new frontier, a new challenge to different parameters of war. The war has changed to a whole new and different battleground. The road has changed, right? The old armor might not do the job. As we look into the remainder of this year, we've just gone 3 months of this year, that is moving at such a pace this year that makes us even nervous. I look at the church, our congregation especially, in its various departmental plans, and I see a marked difference from last year and the previous years. I feel encouraged. I think we are, however, not yet fully of one accord, moving together. We've not all reached a stage where we are at with our entire body, with our soul and our spirit. There are ever green shoots I see of a new approach in quite a number of our departments at this church. Because of its relative newness, the media ministry have shown that new wineskins are employed in a variety of areas, which are showing most promising results. They tell us all the time of how many, what do you call them? How many visits? Views. You see, terminology has changed. How many views they have. And so I think we are, in some of these departments, doing the right thing. How I wish that the youth, for instance, would come on much stronger to support and take control of the work at large. I like to encourage the youth. You know, we were sitting the other day and we were counting, Calvin and I, 4 days of the week where we have at least 6 hours to sit in each other's company. And then we discussed the church. And then we recognized that, you know, I'm not going to name them, but the ages I can mention: 73 the one, 71 the other one, 79 the other one, and we can go on. There's Brother Vernon Crouch as well. The leadership needs change. And the youth is there. They're knocking, but we must provide the type of guidance, the type of mentorship, the type of, guidance that they need. So, in First Chronicles, so the personal ministries in reach in this church is slowly coming on stream, and the results are little, but it calls for commitment of heart and of will. The outreach is lagging to some extent, and we call on all of us to resolve to support the various programs of the personal ministries. First Chronicles 12, we see an older David who is king in waiting while the wheels are starting to fall off Saul's kingship. A band of men begin to assemble around David, all sorts of groups offering various battle equipment and fighting skills. This is when David took over. Then in verse 32 we see there were 200 chiefs from a certain tribe. The description of their contribution is that, and this is the quotation, they understood the times and they knew what Israel should do. And that's the quote I want to leave with you. They understood the times. We must understand the times, and they knew what Israel should do. We must know what is asked of us, what we must do. So, as we end this short service, moving on to the next part of the service, I would want to say, let us regroup. Let us reload for the next 9 months. Let us use new wine skins, wine pouches. I leave you with 2 relevant questions to close. What are we doing to allow God to renew and refresh us, to be the appropriate receptacles of new wine? People out there, They don't know the gospel. They haven't heard of the gospel. Even those who have heard the gospel must be rejuvenated by our newness and our belief, the new thing that he might want to do in and through us is what God would want from us. He wants to do a new thing through us and for us. Question that I have in closing, do we understand the times? Have we taken inventory to really know the new lay of the land so as to know what to do in our response? I want to ask you to ponder these questions. This new landscape, this new challenge that we have, how do we assist each other? And the mighty work that is so well positioned through our General Conference, that we put shoulder to the wheel to say, here am I, send me, I'm willing, and I will renew myself, I will study my Bible, I will pray much more for the work that we have to do. This is my prayer, humble prayer, to have us as a church move forward in strength and a real commitment to do what is required of us. May the Lord help us as we move forward. We will